Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters, and welcome to the long-awaited Terrifier review series. Yes, we are going to be going through all of the Terrifier films leading up to the hotly anticipated Terrifier 3. So definitely grab your Christmas tree or sunflower sunglasses, grab your hacksaws and your trash bags, and sit back as we dive in to the first part of the Terrifier series, going over the origins of Art the Clown. Yes, folks, Terrifier 3 is upon us. We, at the recording of this video, only have, I want to say, less than 10 days. Yeah, it's a little almost about 2 weeks here before the film fully drops and we get to witness it with you guys. Opening nights, we have our tickets. It's going to be an absolute blast. So we knew we wanted to do something special for this. Before Terrifier 2, we did a review of Terrifier, and we were not super kind about it. But I think we've said it many times. We were unanointed. We were not the biggest, fans, nor even the most influence into what Art the Clown was or what any of this universe could be. So we were pretty harsh on it. But over the last 2 years, opinions have slightly changed, and we've had to expose ourselves to some of the other pieces that came into play when building what was later Terrifier 2. And this is a very big one because, yes, this is the origins of Art the Clown with 2013's All Hallows Eve. So, Luke, this is the first time you've seen this, correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so this is the first exposure for Luke, and I will say, just like my sister, who showed me Terrifier, she was the one who was like, hey, I want to watch this. We're babysitting my infant son. He's asleep on my chest. We're watching the first Terrifier. She also showed me this one around the same time. And yeah, so this would actually be my second time going around with All Hallows Eve. So I knew a little bit more of what to expect going into this one. But Luke, because this is your first time going into this, I want to get your fresh perspective on All Hallows Eve before we dive into each of the segments and a bit of the backstory going into the creation of this anthology.
I was definitely excited to look into this one and see what it was all about. Looking at the original Terrifier, and like you said, we weren't too big on that one. But then going into the theater to see Terrifier 2, and you come out of that one realizing the potential the franchise and Art the Clown does have. Looking back, I think it's more of an appreciation in terms of knowing what the franchise, where it started, and then what it is becoming. Because, you already prepped us. Terrifier 3 is coming out only short days away, and we're able to go to local Cinemarks, short drives. We're not driving 45 minutes this time around to just be able to see this film. So it is opening up to a general population, a way bigger audience. And it all started with All Hallows Eve, and seeing this one, I went into this one not really knowing what to expect, knowing it was lower budget. But I wanted to go into this one with more of a film appreciation because we know what Damien Leone is capable of, what he is achieving in modern times. So looking at this one, it was definitely intriguing. I knew it was going to be low budget. I knew it probably wasn't going to live up to the hype of something like a Terrifier 2 or even a Terrifier. But overall, I got to say, there is a big appreciation and some glimmers of a lot of interesting ideas in this one.
Yeah, and this purely came about because of Damien Leone wanting to make short films. This all was never even supposed to be a full-blown anthology. That wasn't thought until way later when a producer approached him. After seeing his first short, which is the first segment, The Ninth Circle, on YouTube. And, I just think that is such a wonderful kind of beginning of the story. Obviously, us being YouTubers, being aspiring filmmakers, that is the dream, isn't it? You post a short film online, it gets some traction, and somebody approaches you and says, hey, I really like this. I'm a film producer. let's expand this a little bit. Let's make this a part of something bigger. And, when you look at it like that, yes, is this film rough around the edges? Oh, yes, it is. It's there are just really the inklings of somebody getting their feet wet into the filmmaking industry. We have been there ourselves. We're still there very much ourselves. So let's not kid ourselves. And it's like I can only look back on this now very fondly, but looking at it from an anthology perspective, looking at it from like just a pure film perspective, it's not the most coherent and definitely not the most, dare I say, scary or very well thought out anthology. You can tell that this is just a lot of stories kind of showcasing somebody's, drive and passion. But if you look at it from that, and I'm going to be honest here, the wraparound segment that was produced for this isn't that bad. And we'll get into that a little bit more here. But Luke, just going through all of these, short films, obviously starting off with the Ninth Circle and then moving into the other two here, well, climaxing with Terrifier, was there a particular one that you found a fondness for? Was there one that you enjoyed?
Probably overall, I would say the very last segment, Terrifier. I think that's really where we're coming into form with what we know with Art the Clown and what to expect, in terms of that kind of ultra violence in that gore. So that one really did it for me. I think it had a lot of interesting ideas, kind of bringing those supernatural elements to Art the Clown, and him just kind of showing up, him on the side of the road with the sign. I thought was hilariously done. It was just so off-putting, but that is the one for me where I started finding that groove of what Terrifier was going to be and what it has become. It has probably the best feel of, we know what Damien Leone wants to achieve, and that clear kind of path from that last segment in All Hallows Eve, and then reaching to what we do get with an extended version of Terrifier and then Terrifier 2.
Yeah, and for me, I have to agree with you. I think that the Terrifier short is definitely the most fun. You can definitely see a progression, and that's probably one of the elements that I love the most about All Hallows Eve is that there is a clear progression from the first to the third short. Now, let's not kid ourselves. We might as well start with the weakest one of the bunch, which is the second short, and this is an untitled short. So
Okay.
there is no title. You aren't crazy. You don't remember it because I had to double check and go through that myself many times just to see what it is. But it involves this young woman. Obviously, they all do. Named Caroline, who she moves into a home and talking about her husband John. He's a painter, and he's kind of uh, become obsessed in a way with this one painting and is kind of losing his mind, saying that maybe he's being stalked by aliens. It's very out there. It is the most like disjointed short of any of these. And if you look into the history of this was purely put in here from the producers to kind of just pad out the runtime, get us to close to a feature length film kind of thing. This was an idea that was put together very quickly and shot very quickly. And the painting being Art the Clown at the end was purely just a cameo.
Yeah, and it feels a little shoehorned, I guess, just unnatural in terms of what we do get. There's a variation of production value in these ones, especially when you go with that first short, the Ninth Circle, and then you move into this one where I told you before we started recording, I had to check to make sure I was still watching the same film. I watch this on Tubi, and sometimes they just load up films right afterward. And I thought I had missed something because of that quality jump in this one. And we're dealing with an alien. I thought going into this, to be honest, because I didn't read anything, I just knew it had Art the Clown in it. I thought each segment had Art the Clown in it. So for a good deal of this one, I'll be honest, I thought Art the Clown was going to pop up somewhere, and I was like, nope. I guess it's just the painting at the end is the cameo for Art the Clown in this one, which this one didn't really hit for me, which is not surprising. I think alien stories have to be very unique in their approach, and this one's just kind of your basic kind of chase scenes. It's extended a little longer than usual, which I don't want to say there's nothing here of value. It just was so typical. There's really nothing that's going to differentiate this from another alien tale that's out there other than, this being Damien Leone and doing this on a smaller budget, which, there is maybe some minor tension here, but overall, I think this one was just kind of get through this so we can see another Art the Clown short for me.
Yeah, and I think a big portion of this, kind of the mantra of All Hallows Eve, and something that I definitely can 100% support and understand, is that this was a lot of Damien Leone just saying, let me just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. What can I hang my hat on so that way I can push forward into something a little bit more focused? And, it is kind of wild saying that that would be Terrifier as we move into the next segment of this series, but we'll save it. But it is something that, looking back on it, you totally understand because, again, like you said, we have aliens, we have demonic presences, we're dealing with hell, demons, all kinds of shit throughout this. And it's not really until we get to the last short where we more or less get more of a focus on Art the Clown. But before we dive into Terrifier, which I guess we can say is probably our favorite of the three, I want to know your thoughts on the Ninth Circle, because, there's definitely elements in there that you later see in some of these other films. You can see that there was groundwork here, there's ideas there or nuggets of ideas that maybe they just didn't have the ability or the budget to expand upon.
Yeah, this one was rather interesting, I will say. Of course, I think when you first dive into All Hallows Eve and you see Art the Clown for the first time, the biggest thing you're going to take away is how different his appearance looks in that
Mm-hmm.
one. And, it was definitely odd to seeing Terrifier, Terrifier 2, and then going back and checking out All Hallows Eve to see Art the Clown in that fashion, which I understand this was the initial one. This was kind of getting the ball rolling and everything. Um, you know, the Art the Clown's in it for, I don't know, a few minutes before we really dive more so into that deeper story. And that's really, I think, when the deeper story does take off for that one, because yes, it's low budget, but there's so many things in the Ninth Circle that I think work, especially from a practical standpoint. The way that they were able to kind of push those boundaries on such a limited budget. There's that, I don't know if it has a name. It's something really. It's a big practical piece. I don't. Does that thing have a name? Do you know?
I don't think it has a name. It's not given anything specific. It is just supposed to be some kind of a demon,
Okay.
some certain thing. There's it's alluded to that it's some kind of, like, I guess, like form of Satan. It's very interesting. I gotta say.
I'll say that part did captivate me. There's when we get into the everyone's chained up and the one actress gets ripped out down the hallway with the chain. I thought that was rather well done. And then when we do run into this big monstrosity, that really did captivate me. I think it loses me toward the end of it just because the subject matter for me didn't really is something that is mostly missed for me. It has to be done in a particular fashion to really kind of even either off put you. It just kind of can be something where I almost tune out. But I like the idea in terms of being. We talk about things like the First Omen and things that we've seen, that are just so you can kind of see that stuff coming. Where this one, if this was a rather new property and that's the kind of concept we were going with, I think you could build off a story there, especially working backward and trying to figure out what everything's about. So again, you can see some of these glimmers of a lot of potential in Damien Leone's storytelling. This one, obviously, he's doubled down on the Terrifier franchise, but revisiting the Ninth Circle, I think, is definitely something that I would love to see in the future because it does open up a lot of questions. There's a lot of potential there, and just from a practical standpoint, with that low budget, to be able to for Damien Leone to revisit that idea into where he is now in modern times and having the experience and having a bigger budget, I think you could get a rather intriguing story out of that one.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that there's definitely elements of this that we have said in, if you go to our breakdowns of the Terrifier 3 trailer, kind of seeing some of these, what are they, flashbacks? We don't know. They're kind of going back to it. But a lot of people are pointing towards the ninth circle as kind of having a bit of a resurgence here. And I totally see it. I think going back and rewatching this one, you can definitely see that some of those coven elements, those kind of witchy, cult like elements, are kind of coming back to Art the Clown's origins and wondering just what exactly is he? Obviously, we've all kind of suspected that he is some kind of demonic force, some kind of deity, demon of sorts that is, just fucking with people throughout the world. Like, he's just kind of been gone and gone again because he can't die. But like to see it more or less, I guess, in your face on a lower budget in this one, I think being a more bona fide Terrifier fan, it's more interesting than if you were just coming into this cold. I think like going into it now, I can say certainly I am more excited to see what's going forward with this rather than, looking at this on its own, where yes, I would probably be a bit more meh, this is, just pretty standard stuff. And to be honest, that's a lot of what my feelings were the first time that I saw this. I just thought, okay, it's got some good gore, some interesting concepts, but nothing that's like really tangible, nothing that feels focused. And I think that's the biggest strike I can give All Hallows Eve is that it is very unfocused. Even in these segments, there are just a lot of ideas. You can tell that somebody has so many ideas and they just can't figure out what route they want to take. Which brings us to the third of these segments, and that is, strangely enough, the most focused, I would say. And Luke, you want to kind of dive into that one for us? Give us your thoughts and feelings as this one being both of ours preferred segment.
Yeah, this one definitely has the closest vibe to what we've seen with the extended Terrifier franchise. We have our young woman stopping at a gas station there, and that's when we meet our boy, Art the Clown there, causing some mayhem as usual. And this is really where we get into form. Looking at that opening segment with the ninth circle, I think that poses more interesting questions after you've seen the Terrifier franchise, because we're so used to Art inducing mayhem, just absolute slaughter with no real, no real end goal, at least that we know of before we see Terrifier 3 anyway. And then looking at that one where he drugs our actress and then she ends up in the predicament that she's in. So that one kind of poses those questions of, is Art doing the bidding of someone? Where this one is more so him inducing that mayhem that we're so used to. So, I was expecting that in the ninth circle and I didn't get it. And then we get into Terrifier and it's like, okay, now we're getting into the meat and potatoes of what Art the Clown started and where he is now. I'll say this one, for Gorehounds, this satisfies your appetite 100%.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know what to expect going into this one, but as soon as she goes into the building and he's sawing up our gas station attendant, I was like, that's what I was looking for here. And I mean, the mayhem continues. I love the bits that we have, the supernatural elements that we give Art the Clown here. We just get glimmers of things. And you'll probably dive into it. This is not played by David Howard Thornton. And I think that performance, you can give a little tidbit if you like on that, and then we can kind of dive into that performance if you like.
Yeah, this was the Art the Clown in both of these shorts was played by a gentleman named Mike Gianelli. And he is somebody who's worked very closely with Damien Leone. He has worked behind the scenes a little bit on some of the other features that he's done going forward, as from what I understand. But this was the last time that he wanted to act, because the man has admitted many times that he is not, an aspiring actor. He was filling a role to essentially help out his friend and be there so that he could get his vision done. He's taken one for the team, being one of the boys. And for the most part, I can say, yeah, it's like he's no David Howard Thornton. Who is going to be David Howard Thornton? I mean, the man is a mime. He's absolutely his own energy, own spirit, own everything. And I think that, looking at it, yeah, it's easy for people to say, well, this is just B-rate Art the Clown. But in my opinion, I think that this is essentially just them getting their feet wet and getting things started. So I see a lot of what, we can kind of dissect from what David would give us later and what Damien had already thought of. I mean, there's already the horn that he's using. He's carrying around a trash bag. He's doing all this other stuff. So it's like you can see juxtaposing performances, what David brought and what Damien already had in mind for the character. So it is admirable, I will say. It's not something I'm not going to sit here and hate on the guy because, again, he's not an actor. He's not somebody who's trying to woo anybody. He is doing this for his friend. And I can say that is just an admirable approach and honestly a huge plus for him to be able to admit that and not be like bitter about it. You hear about some of these actors who've portrayed, Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees kind of having a bitter feeling and thoughts about not getting to continue it. It's pretty funny to see somebody who's actually like, no, it's all good. Like they're doing their own thing.
Yeah, and being more introduced to the David Howard Thornton approach to Art the Clown, you look at that one and he's got this fluidness that he does. We saw it in Stream as well, where you look at that film, you could clearly see that it's David Howard Thornton,
and hey, even in the mean one, one too. Mm-hmm.
He just has this contortion of his body, his usage there that a lot of people don't. I think Jim Carrey is really another person that I can put in that conversation with David Howard Thornton, of just kind of the control they have over their body is unmatched for most actors. Where Mike Giannelli, I'll say his performance is different than David Howard Thornton, but he still has some of those same mannerisms that you could tell were trying to be brought through. But there is one particular element in here that I do enjoy from the performance. As we get in deeper into the actual story, where our actress takes cover in, is it a barn? Or I think maybe
it looks like a barn of some sort, maybe a shed.
And she kind of, locks Art out of there, and we think, hey, okay, all is safe. He's not gonna be able to get through. And then he kind of just, starts appearing from under the ground. There is an image in there for me that I thought was, from a performance perspective, was pretty terrifying for me, where he stands up as she's trying to get out, and he turns, and he almost had this Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers-esque quality to him, where he just looked scary, like overbearing, I guess I would say. Whereas, David Howard Thornton has that Freddy Krueger approach where he's more fluid, he's kind of flamboyant. It's a different kind of terrifying. So I don't usually get that from Art the Clown, but with Mike Giannelli's performance, at least in that instance, I wouldn't say it's all throughout the entire film itself, but in that instance, it really kind of stuck in my head to say, "Ooh, that's a little different feeling that Art the Clown gave me than I usually get."
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's definitely worthy of mentioning that it's not all just, placeholder stuff. It's not all bad. It's like there's definitely elements to it that I also enjoyed. I think that especially once we get towards the latter half of Terrifier here, you can see that he seems more comfortable. He seems more attuned with what he's trying to do. And yeah, I think that this one on the whole is regarded by many and us as the best short. It's the most consistent. It is the closest to what we will later see in the following films that we're used to. And like Luke said, when you walk in there and you see the person getting hacked up, it's kind of like, oh yeah, this is what we're expecting. This is kind of what we need. So moving on to the final piece of All Hallows Eve, I do want to touch on this wraparound segment, which I quite enjoy. I think it's very simple. It's very to the point, but, what else are you going to do with a movie called All Hallows Eve better than having, kids, a babysitter, watching horror movies, eating candy on Halloween night while parents are out doing whatever. And, you're just going to be sitting there enjoying your time. And then what happens? One of the kids gets a mysterious VHS tape, which, as we said, is kind of the catalyst, the wraparound, the thing that keeps this whole, story moving and why they're watching it. What were your thoughts on the wraparound segment, Luke?
Looking at the concept, I'll say it kind of gives you those warm and fuzzies, because I think as a writer, a creative, a filmmaker, we all kind of have these ideas of things that we watched as kids, and then kind of intriguing concepts, putting yourself back in that kid headspace and saying, what would be terrifying? In looking at this one, getting a tape in your trick-or-treat bag and then putting that on and being introduced to Art the Clown, I think, that idea works. I think I would have preferred another Art the Clown entry in that rather than the alien entry, just because if it was kind of composed almost as if found footage and we were watching these murders happen, I think that would have been rather intriguing. Um, but I love that idea, and then the tension that they build. I mean, the acting's not the best. It's low budget. You know, you you do what you can. Especially casting child actors, you never really know what you're going to get there, and it's not offensively bad. I think it kind of adds to those elements to it as well. But looking at that idea, I think that is something where we've all had that idea to implement into a script, and it feels natural, it feels organic. It doesn't feel like they shoehorn that in. That's why I think, you can kind of jumble up these ideas in terms of what we're looking at with an alien, with a killer clown, with, the ninth circle of hell or whatever, where they don't need that connective tissue, because that connective tissue is that wraparound story. It's just a conglomeration of different instances on this VHS. So, for me, I think it works. It's something where I had a lot of fun with it. It's not the big budget thing that we probably want out of something like this, but I think, you can clearly see Damien Leone has that DNA of being that love for horror and those horror storytelling, because in an instance, kind of, it is your classic form of campfire tales, where we're not sitting by the campfire, we're putting in a VHS and we're seeing those ideas take place right in front of us.
Yeah, and especially the final few moments here where it's like you see Sarah, the babysitter, she finds herself like, seeing Art the Clown on the television coming around, banging on the screen of the television.
I did
and
enjoy
then
that as well. I thought that was a lot of fun.
and then you have like you see all these elements from different horror movies where it's like they get a phone call, it's one of the dead people from the segments, it's all this stuff, and then finally for him to pop up behind her, only for everything to climax into her hearing the screams of Tina and Timmy, the kids she's been watching. And I know everybody's been so up in arms. We were with many videos, many conversations. Our buddy Evan did a really great one talking about the controversy for Art the Clown when it had that teaser drop. And then we did a video. I did one where I spoke about it. All of that comes from people who have clearly not seen this film, because Art the Clown straight up decapitates and leaves 2 severed heads of children in All Hallows Eve. I mean, like, it's right there for you. She enters the room just to see their severed heads and Art spelled out across the wall. And that's the end of our film. So it's like, yeah, Art the Clown was pushing the envelope long before he was slicing people hot dog style or messing them up so bad and making a huge mess of their bedroom.
Listen, it's in his DNA. He can't escape it there. He's just delivering mayhem by the pound, apparently. And, I had heard about that before going into All Hallows Eve. And I'll say, what an exclamation point
Mm-hmm.
to end the film on. To ensure that people would be talking about this film, for better or worse. I think when you cover that type of ground, I think that's always going to be a talking point. And again, Damien Leone did not shy away from using the effects here. A lesser filmmaker on a smaller budget would not have shown what they show. Even at the end of the Terrifier, that one, I think, to go in that realm of effects, it's just astounding to me. I don't know what the budget with this thing was, but I can't imagine that it was huge. But to cover those practical effects into, we're not doing low light. We're not doing anything like that. We're really just showing off what we can do. And we're building this character of Art the Clown. It is just absolutely insane to me to think over 10 years. And this is where we're at.
Yeah. And, I think that we have been very kind to this, coming at it from, again, a perspective of people just understanding, what it looks like to make an anthology like this, especially though having one character's vision. I mean, one person's vision, with this being all Damien Leone. This just to give you a little bit of tidbit here, I wrote it down. There is a estimated budget of about 500,000 for this. So I mean, it really shows just what he's able to do with very little money. I would say it's probably less than that, knowing this team and knowing what they can accomplish with very little. So, I think that overall, this is something that I understand if you watch this and you don't enjoy it. And I completely get it. It's not something that I'm going to find myself throwing on all of the time. But as a bona fide Terrifier 2 fan and Art the Clown fan immensely, I find myself almost needing to go pay my respects, really give this an honest watch and understand, where everything started. And again, like we've said 100 times, as an aspiring filmmaker, it is awesome to see somebody start from here to what is now Terrifier 3, like Luke said, in every Cinemark down the road. You don't have to drive an hour to go see it. And it's not going to be something that, you just get to talk with a couple of friends. It's going to be everybody that is at least now heard of Art the Clown.
Certainly. And, if the first time you were introduced to Terrifier was actually with Terrifier 2, because it was such a big film, it's caught on with so many people, even that are not into independent horror, into driving 50 minutes away to go see a film. Since it's popped up on streaming, Art the Clown's, on TikTok, we have so many memes. He's kind of bled over into just pop culture in general. So, if you started with Terrifier 2 and you're curious about All Hallows Eve and are wondering if it's going to be the same level of Terrifier 2, it's not. Unfortunately, it's a smaller budget, but I think you have to go into this with an appreciation lens rather than being critical of the film. And, just because you enjoy Terrifier 2 and don't enjoy All Hallows Eve, that doesn't make you any less of a Terrifier fan. So there's no real gatekeeping here. It's just kind of go into it, take out what you enjoy from the film, just appreciate what Damien Leone, his roots, where he started and where he is now, because there are so many filmmakers out there that have great ideas and something gets lost between, it's usually budget, between that creative vision and then that lens. And to see Damien Leone start with that initial, the ninth circle, and to where we are now with Terrifier 3, I think everyone has to appreciate that trajectory in a career, because a lot of people never make it that far. You never have that idea that gets sought out from anyone to be able to say, let's put some more money behind it. And honestly, Terrifier as a franchise as a whole has really changed the game. We talk about it on the channel all the time, of Skinamarink, the Outwaters, given opportunities that probably wouldn't have existed other than Terrifier 2 doing such big numbers back when it had come out into theater. So I think you have to go back for All Hallows Eve and really appreciate those roots and that idea and just that potential of creativeness. So yeah, it's not the best film in terms of, if you want to be critical of it, you certainly can be. But again, it didn't come from a huge budget, didn't come from a big production studio. Damien Leone and his team, they did what they could with what they had, and now we're here going to be enjoying Terrifier 3.
100% Luke. It was very well said. I enjoyed it. Yeah, I mean, that's All Hallows Eve, folks. That is just about everything we can say about this. Again, if you've never seen it and you're anticipating Terrifier 3, it is important, I think, to go back and check this one out. It's important to pay your respects and just see kind of, where it all started. But also, like we said, it seems like some of these elements from the ninth circle, if you were just going to, you can find just that as a short film on YouTube as well, if you don't want to commit yourself to the whole anthology series. But I think that one especially is going to be very important going forward. I think you're going to maybe see some returning elements in there, if not just shades of it. So I would recommend at least checking that out. But I think as a whole, this isn't a bad watch, especially because the wraparound does give you, like Luke said, the warm and fuzzies. It definitely is a good one to throw on around that October time. It's one that honestly I will probably not watch every year, but I could see myself at least throwing on that, skipping the second segment, and just kind of watching, that in the wraparound. Which, if you skip that, what is it? It brings it down to what, like less than an hour, I think,
Yeah.
if you do
Yes.
that. So it's not much of a commitment at all. But yeah, I think on the whole, this one is definitely interesting. It's definitely one that I don't know if we ever would have expected to see ourselves finding the golden nuggets in this one and appreciating what it was. But hey, that's what good filmmaking does. It's like you can kind of come back and appreciate things. Again, we're not saying this is a home run. We're not saying this is something that's transcending anthology horror or anything. But as fans of the series, as fans of Damien and his team, it's good to go back and acknowledge what's come before.
It's not a home run, but what they say in Moneyball, He got on base.
He got on base. Yep, and that's what they did. They certainly got on base because it would only be a few years after this one, about 3, that the world would be introduced to Art the Clown once again, this time in his own solo feature without any kind of middle, messy, untitled shorts, with Terrifier. And we, again, have already spoken about it, so you can find a very old review where we're not very kind on it because we weren't, again, very into this. So it's going to be interesting for us to go back and revisit it. I have revisited it since I saw Terrifier 2. And although, again, not my favorite film, I found some things to be positive about. And I'm really curious to see what we have to say. But I'm even more excited to dive into more of the behind the scenes on Terrifier, just like I was here, because it's so cool to see all of these little pieces that have got us here to make Art the Clown what he is today. And that's what the importance of this series is. We're not just talking about the films, but the behind the scenes and what came before. So, alrighty, guys. Other than that, that's going to wrap us up here. So stay tuned with us. Yes, this will only be a few days, and you'll get that Terrifier part 2 of this. And yeah, then we'll be rolling right into Terrifier 3 and Terrifier 2, all the other good stuff. So, alrighty. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the hard shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, gonna smash your ass. 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 Splattercast, gonna smash your ass.